Welcome back to another Giant Slayer TV video. 10.1 has been quite the patch so far, with extremely dominant builds like Sivir and Friends, Husband and Wife, and anything with Yorick 2 in it. These compositions are so dominant that there needed to be a 10.1b patch to address their power, which came out on Wednesday. We're going to explore some of those builds and a few others to talk about the general flow of the game and touch on parts of the meta. Keep in mind that this is based on the North American meta, and parts of this will be speculation, as it will be a few more days before the meta stabilizes after 10.1b. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting news to come. The interest form is down below, so feel free to fill that out if you'd like to compete. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TV social medias and check out our amazing cast in the description. With that said, let's get back into the video. Alright, early game. First, let's go over a few item components to look for on the beginning carousel. Spatula is a popular choice in 10.1 as it's usually used to make someone either a Blade Master or turn them into a light unit. It's also viable to go for a Force of Nature as well, but more commonly you're going to see a Blade Master or Light Spat used. After the nerfs to Sivir, Yorick, and Lucian, it remains to be seen whether Spatula is still contested in the early game. Besides Spatula, Sparring Gloves are really flexible to pick up early. Infinity Edge, Jeweled Gauntlet, Thieves Gloves, and Last Whisper are all potentially viable items to go for in many compositions, and Glove enables that. Rod is also good as it can be made into items for Azir, who's a popular carry, or for Ocean Mage compositions. Rellenomicon, while nerfed, is still a viable catch-all item to make many compositions, and having healing reduction effect is always useful. The last item that we suggest you look for is the Tear. Tear is a bit less flexible, but Seraphs can enable several different champions such as Kindred or Lux, and Hush is still great for Sivir and Olaf. Negatron Cloak was quite useful because it was good for Sivir, but the 10.1b nerf makes it so that her ultimate doesn't proc off of Runins. This means Cloak is much less of a necessity and thus has lowered value in getting it early. Now, after talking about items for the early game, let's review leveling. Leveling times are still roughly the same. We personally don't recommend leveling on 2-1 as you've lowered your chances of hitting a 1-cost unit on 2-2. However, if you do have a strong enough board, such as having a 2-star unit or something like Woodlands, you can level on 2-1, but it's better on 2-2. As usual, if you level before 2-5, you should level on 2-5, so it's gold efficient. You don't have to level at 2-5 though. You can stay at level 4 till Krugs, where we suggest you level if you wish to maintain a loss streak for extra gold. Generally, you only do this if you're already on a loss streak, or it will cost you too much economy to level pre-Krugs. The old rule of thumb for your economy should still be relevant. 20 gold by 2-5, 40 to 50 gold by Krugs. This will always vary, but keep those gold values in mind. And then we're past Krugs and on to the 2 rounds after it. There's been a huge shift in how rounds 3-1 and 3-2 are approached in 10.1. Basically, a lot of players are playing hyper aggressive on these rounds, where they level to 6 on either 3-1 or 3-2 and roll a majority of their gold. This was popular in 10.1 due to the power of Sivir, Azir, and Yorick, and with those 2 units nerfed in 10.1b, it'll be interesting to see how much that changes. We do not recommend leveling to 6 on 3-1 unless you're doing it to maintain a win streak for gold. Otherwise, it's more efficient to wait until 3-2. So when shouldn't you roll at level 6? In general, we'd say if you're not playing a contested composition that relies on low cost units, 1 to 3 cost units, you shouldn't roll all of your gold at level 6. If you're really weak and below 50 before 3-2, you can roll to stabilize, but otherwise just sit on your gold until level 7. Early game ends around 3-2, which is when we enter the mid game. This is where you start having a better idea of where you want to take your composition or solidifying certain builds that you already have. It's also a good time to make sure that you're grabbing a good item carry or mid-game carry if you haven't found one yet. Unlike in Set 1, Set 2 has fewer options for mid-game carry champions. There's not many 2-cost units worth holding onto for a long time or giving items to. Here's a list of decent 1, 2, and 3 cost units for early and mid-game. Zyra, Nico, Kindred, Kiana, Sivir, and Azir. These are all great to look for and play in the early to mid game. Some scale into late game like Sivir and Azir, where others like Zyra and Nico fall off after Wolves. Keep in mind that it's okay to play any of these champions for carrying items without forcing yourself to build a composition around them. You can play in Azir too and sell them later if you find a composition to transition into, as an example. Just think of those units as stepping stones for later and not something that you have to build around. For the economy at this stage, we suggest not rolling much. Especially if you roll down after leveling to 6, you need to recover your economy and play for 50 gold to be aiming to get to level 7. The past few metas have evolved to be faster paced, so it's likely that you'll see a lobby leveling at 3-5. It does cost you a lot if you don't have a good economy beforehand, so we recommend only doing this for a few reasons. The first reason is if you're at low health, around 40 or 50, and need to stabilize. The second reason is to maintain a win streak if you've already been pre-leveling to 7 prior to 3-5, so it won't cost you as much. The last reason is to hit 7 and roll for particular units. This was popular with Blender in the previous meta. If you don't roll at 6 for compositions that use Sivir, Azir, or Yorick, you'll generally be leveling and rolling at 7 on 3-5. This improves your chances of hitting those units and lets you play a more well-rounded composition with 7 units. If you did roll and level at 6 on 3-2, then you won't have the economy to do so at 3-5. In this case, you can level at a more usual timing on 4-1 after Wolves. If you've been really strong all game and have high health, something like above 70, you can level to 7 at the normal time and then play for a fast level 8. This has been less popular in 10.1 because lobbies tend to be very fast paced, and we only recommend doing this if you're high enough health to take 2 to 3 losses in a row. Fast level 8 generally means leveling to level 8 on 4-3. There are variations that do it on 4-1 or 4-2, but these are extreme cases and you generally don't have the economy to do it comfortably, so look to do it on 4-3 if you're planning to fast 8. The reason that you'd fast 8 is that you have a better chance of hitting 4 and 5 cost units and have a unit advantage on your board over other players that rolled at 7. We want to make it very clear that this is currently very risky to do if the rest of the lobby is playing aggressively with their economy. If you end up not hitting your champions quick enough after leveling, you can easily bottom 4 from that point. Alright, so that's an overview of mid-game carries, leveling times, and general economy. What about composition? Let's do a quick overview of these. Let's start off with Sivir and Friends. This build, which is basically just Sivir carry with Blademaster Azir, was extremely dominant in 10.1. It has received a nerf in 10.1b with Sivir's ultimate Ricochet no longer working with Runan's Hurricane. This is important because Runan's was adding a lot of damage to her ultimate. It definitely hurts her, but she's still very strong. The itemization just changes slightly. Azir is also another important part of the build and has easily made the main carry. So here's what a level 7 variation of the build might look like. Basically, 4 Blademaster, 2 Desert, 2 Lunar, 2 Warden is a basic variation of this composition. A lot of the pieces are flexible, but the two most important are Azir with a Blademaster item, which is Blade of the Rune King, and Sivir. Sivir also works well with Infinity Edge and on-hit items such as Red Buff or Hush. Azir can be given IE Jeweled Gauntlet to be a main carry, and basically any AP item such as Death Cap functions well on him. Keep in mind that this is just your mid-game variation of the build and won't always be the same. Position Azir and Sivir away from each other so they don't get killed by AoE, otherwise position is needed for your lobby. 6 Light 2 Soulbound has become less popular in 10.1b as both Yorick and Lucian were nerfed. Light may still be useful, but more than likely you'd rather play 3 instead of 6. The style of play is still viable, it's just worse overall, but still, with the right items and positioning, this composition can still do well. Guardian Angel and Morellonomicon are a must on Senna, and you can also make her a light unit. Lucian items are all varied and really depends on what you find. On hit is great like Hush or Giant Slayer, and AP items like Deathcap or Jeweled Gauntlet can work as well. The most important part of this composition is definitely Yorick too, so make sure you work towards getting him. Another variation of this at level 7 is using Lunar over Senna and playing Lucian in the backline like a regular carry. Crit Witch, aka 4 Ranger with Twitch carry, has become a popular variation of Ranger after the buffs he received. Ranger has several variations that you can go, this just being one of them. Shiv stacking or 2 Ranger are other variations that you'll likely see. Your front line is flexible as it's mostly just any Wardens that you can get 2-starred. Amumu and Taric are the best ones to look for, but they can be difficult to find at level 7, so just play whatever you can until you hit those. Items are a bit narrow for Crit Twitch. Infinity Edge and Last Whisper are a must. Your third item can vary, though we'd recommend using Quicksilver as it helps keep your Twitch from being randomly CC'd and therefore killed. Other than items on Twitch, you can play whatever you get, though frontline defensive items are quite helpful in this build. This composition is a bit hard to get in the mid game as you do need a level 2 Twitch, but if you're able to hit it, it'll stabilize quite well. 6 Berserker 2 Desert is the most basic way to play Zerkers. It has been a common build for a while, so not much more needs to be said about it. Locket did get a nerf, but it is still good to stack in this composition and can be placed on the Mundo, Volibear, or Scion. Olaf items are flexible, though RFC, Hush, and Infinity Edge are all worth getting. It's a very simple composition that really comes online at level 7. 4 Ocean, 3 Mage is another build that's been around for a while and shouldn't be too hard to get online. Champions are flexible at level 7, and you can get in 4 Warden, 3 Inferno, or other variations just to make sure you have 3 Mages and 4 Ocean. If you have a Talia, you can play Ocean Kiana to get Mountain for level 7 with Malphite. Not much needs to be said about this composition or Berserkers, as they're pretty basic compositions that have been around since the onset of Set 2. There are just a few compositions played around level 7 during the mid game. They aren't the only ones, though you'll see that these are quite common, in particular Sivir and Friends and Berserkers. Make sure to scout and check what other people in the lobby are playing. Now on to the late game. Generally, the late game comes post Raptors when a majority of the lobby is going towards level 8. We won't be going over every possibility late game, but we can talk about a few traits and units that you're going to want to look for. First, let's talk about Poison, or more specifically, Singed. Singed is a great late game unit that can be added into a lot of different compositions if you hit him as a 2-star. Relinomicon is the only item that you really need, though Deathcap, Jeweled Gauntlet, and making him an Inferno are all viable options as well. With Singed, you can also play Poison in a few compositions such as Rangers and Berserkers. Singed and Poison are a great addition to a late game build for level 8 and 9. Next, we bring up Summoners. Summoners have been nerfed multiple times, but despite that, even with the most recent Yorick nerfs, they can still be a good late game addition to your composition. Yorick 2 adds so much health to your board, and giving it the Summoner buff makes that even better. Sivir and Friends can add in Yorick Summoners, Ocean Mage can add in Yorick and Annie, and it's also viable to play Summoner Assassin if you manage to get a Z2. An additional note for playing Yorick is adding in 2 extra light units to give 3 lights, which makes his ghouls even harder to deal with. Mystic is the most common late game splash that you'll likely add, but with the addition of Karma, it's a lot easier to run 4 Mystic. Nami is still what you want to play over Master Yi in this case, but it's definitely flexible. Scout the lobby and check to see what everyone else is playing and whether 4 Mystic will be beneficial. Otherwise, splashing in 2 Mystic late game is really easy to do and often one of the best level 8 and 9 additions to your build. Lastly, let's talk Amumu and Taric. Amumu is definitely a bit weaker after his nerfs, but he can give you so much AoE CC that running him at level 8 or 9, even by himself, is often worth doing. He also enables 6 Inferno, which isn't really viable without him and can be a strong late game choice if you're able to run it. Taric has really become a staple late game unit because his ultimate can keep so many of your units alive long enough to win a round. He works well on his own, but can enable certain compositions in the late game, such as Rangers with Ashe. There's a lot of ways you can play the late game, but the most important thing to do is scout. Check out what the lobby is playing and plan accordingly. Most builds are generally finished by level 7, so adding in splash traits or champions at 8 or 9 is a great way to try it and counterplay or play around other players' compositions. So scout, scout, and more scout. That is going to be it for today's video. What are your favorite compositions to play in this meta? Let us know in the comments below. Stay tuned for our Thursday video where we review the new patch and supply a new tier list. As always, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you everyone for listening and watching on Giant Slayer TV.